You think she didn't say a word because she was broken? No. You mistake silence for surrender. The hurricane is silent right before it rips the roof off the world. Welcome back to the channel. Today we have a story that redefines the revenge narrative. It starts with a signature on a divorce decree and ends with an empire crumbling, not with a scream, but with a whisper. This is the story of Norabel, a woman who walked out of a marriage with nothing, only to step into a black limousine that had been waiting for her long before the ink was dry. Get comfortable. You won't guess where this is going. The heat in the city was oppressive. It was a dry, choking heat that turned the asphalt into a shimmering mirage and made the air taste like old copper. There were no clouds, no promise of rain to wash away the grime of the day. Just the relentless, unblinking eye of the sun staring down at the courthouse steps. Inside, the air conditioning hummed a low, artificial note, doing little to cool the friction in courtroom 4B. Emmerich Swanshire sat at the mahogany table, his posture a masterclass in feigned nonchalance. He checked his watch, a limited edition Patek Philippe that cost more than the house he had just successfully fought to keep. He adjusted his silk tie, the knot perfect, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass. He looked at the woman sitting across from him, Norabel. She wore a simple grey dress, linen, slightly wrinkled from the humidity outside. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, exposing a neck that looked too fragile to hold up the weight of the silence she carried. She hadn't spoken a word in 40 minutes. Not when Emmerich's lawyer, a shark named Vance, listed her lack of contribution to the Swanshire tech empire. Not when the judge asked if she contested the prenup that left her with practically nothing but her maiden name. She just signed. The scratch of the pen on the paper was the loudest sound in the room. "Done," Emmerich said, his voice smooth, dripping with a pity that felt more like acid. "Honestly, Nora, this is for the best. You were drowning in my world. Now you can go back to whatever it is you do. Knitting? Reading?" He chuckled, glancing at his lawyer. Norabel capped the pen. She placed it perfectly parallel to the edge of the document. She stood up. Her eyes, usually a warm hazel, were opaque, like flat stones in a dry riverbed. She looked at Emmerich, then through him, as if he were a smudge on a window pane. She turned and walked out. "Not even a goodbye?" Emmerich called after her, a flicker of annoyance cracking his veneer. "I'm giving you a clean break, Nora. Most women would kill for this lack of drama." The heavy oak doors swung shut, swallowing his voice. Emmerich scoffed, gathering his files. "She's in shock," he told Vance. "She'll be calling me in a week, begging for a loan. She has no one. I was her entire existence." Outside, the heat hit Norabel like a physical blow. The city noise, horns, jackhammers, the drone of traffic, rushed in to fill the void of the quiet courtroom. She walked down the concrete stairs, her heels clicking a steady, rhythmic beat. She didn't look back at the imposing stone building. She didn't check her phone. She didn't cry. She reached the curb just as a vehicle turned the corner. It wasn't a taxi. It wasn't an Uber. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, elongated, painted a black so deep it seemed to absorb the punishing sunlight. The chrome grille gleamed like the teeth of a predator. It glided to the curb with a ghostly silence that defied its massive engine. Tourists stopped to stare. A few phones came out. In this part of the city, Billionaire rides were rare. Emmerich, stepping out of the courthouse moments later, froze at the top of the stairs. He squinted against the glare. "Who is that?" he muttered. The rear door of the Phantom opened. A driver in a pristine suit stepped out, not to open the door for Norabel. She had already reached for the handle herself, but to intercept a pedestrian who was getting too close. Norabel slid into the dark interior. Through the tinted glass, For one brief second, Emmerich thought he saw a silhouette inside. A man. A profile sharp as a hawk's, silver hair catching a stray beam of light. The car didn't idle. It peeled away, merging seamlessly into the chaotic traffic, vanishing like smoke in a wind tunnel. Emmerich stood on the hot concrete, the divorce decree heavy in his hand. A cold shiver ran down his spine, entirely unrelated to the air conditioning he had left behind. "Vance," Emmerich said, his voice tight. "Did you run the background check on her associates again?" "3 times, Mr. Swanshire. She has a library card and a subscription to a botany journal. She's a nobody." Emmerich stared at the empty space where the car had been. Nobodies don't get picked up by ghosts. The interior of the Phantom was a sanctuary of cool air and the scent of aged leather and sandalwood. The silence here was different from the courtroom. It wasn't empty. It was heavy with intent. Hadrian Westmere sat on the opposite leather bench. He was a man etched from granite and history, his eyes the color of steel. He was 60 perhaps, but carried the vitality of a man half his age. He held a crystal tumbler of sparkling water. He didn't offer one to Norabel. He knew she hated bubbles. He pushed a bottle of still artisan water across the mahogany console toward her. "It's done?" Hadrian asked. His voice was a deep rumble, a basso profundo that commanded boardrooms across 3 continents. "Signed and sealed," Norabel said. Her voice was raspy from disuse, but strong. She picked up the water, twisting the cap with a precise, violent torque. "He thinks I'm going back to knitting." Hadrian allowed himself a rare, dry smile. Emmerich was always a man of limited imagination. That was his fatal flaw. He mistook your quiet for absence. "He mistook my work for his own," Norabel corrected, taking a long drink. She leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment. "Are the servers ready?" "Primrose has the uplink established. The relocation of the assets began the moment your pen lifted from the paper. We have a 3-hour window before he realizes the glitch in his R&D department isn't a glitch." Norabel opened her eyes. The opacity was gone, replaced by a terrifying razor-sharp intelligence. "And the Westmere merger?" Paused, pending the arrival of the chief architect. Hadrian leaned forward. "I didn't send the car for a charity case, Norabel. I sent it because my company is currently bleeding $40 million a day trying to solve the algorithmic knot you tied 6 years ago. I need the key." "I am the key," she whispered. This was the secret that had suffocated her marriage. To the world, Norabel was the quiet, decorative wife of Emmerich Swanshire, the tech prodigy. But in the shadows, behind encrypted servers and late-night consulting sessions under the pseudonym The Architect, she was the brain. She had built Emmerich's code. She had designed his flagship AI. And slowly, as his ego grew, he had walled her off, claiming the credit, convincing himself the genius was his, and eventually believing she was a burden. She had let him believe it, until today. "Where are we going?" Norabel asked, looking out the tinted window as the city skyline shifted from government grey to the sleek glass of the financial district. "The Spire," Hadrian said. "Garrick Hollowthorne is making a move. He knows Emmerich is vulnerable now that you're gone, even if he doesn't understand why. Garrick is circling. If we don't secure the patent for Project Ether tonight, Hollowthorne buys Emmerich out by Friday, and your life's work becomes a weapon for the military-industrial complex." Norabel's hands clenched. "Project Ether is for communication. It's for disaster relief. It's not a weapon." "It is whatever the highest bidder says it is," Hadrian countered gently. "Unless you claim it." The car turned up a private ramp, descending into the belly of a skyscraper that pierced the clouds. The doors opened, and security teams nodded as Hadrian stepped out. Norabel followed. She wasn't wearing the mask of the submissive wife anymore. Her stride matched Hadrian's. They entered a private elevator. As the numbers climbed, 40, 50, 80, Hadrian handed her a tablet. Your new identity is established. The funds from your independent consulting over the years have been unfrozen. You aren't poor, Norabel. You're wealthier than Emmerich. I don't care about the money, she said, scrolling through the data streams on the screen. I care about the code. Emmerich is going to try to launch the version 4.0 update tonight to celebrate the divorce. A new beginning, he called it. And I removed the syntax bridge for the neural network this morning, she said, a small, dangerous smile touching her lips. When he hits execute, the entire system is going to ask for a password that only exists in my head. The elevator doors opened into a penthouse that looked less like a home and more like a command center. Walls of glass revealed the sprawling city below. Standing by a bank of monitors was a young woman with neon blue hair and tattoos sleeving her arms. Primrose, Norabel said warmly. The hacker spun around, grinning. Boss, you're free. We're not safe yet, Norabel said, throwing her bag onto a velvet sofa. Connect me to the Swanshire mainframe. Let's see what my ex-husband is doing. Emmerich Swanshire felt electric. The champagne in his hand was vintage, the view from his office was commanding, and the dead weight of his marriage was finally gone. He stood in the center of the war room, his company's main development hub. To liberation, he shouted. A dozen sycophants raised their glasses. Among them was Auriella, a stunning woman with ambition that matched his own. She had been his consultant for the past 6 months, a relationship that had overlapped significantly with the end of his marriage. You did it, Em, Auriella purred, draped in red silk. Now show us the future. Launch 4.0. The investors are watching. Emmerich walked to the central console. A massive screen dominated the wall, displaying the Swanshire logo. Ladies and gentlemen, Emmerich announced, his voice booming for the live stream cameras set up in the corner. For years I have carried this company. I have dragged us into the future. Today, unburdened by the past, I give you the Neural Link 4.0. He pressed the biometric scanner. The room held its breath. The screen flashed green, then blue. Then it went black. A single line of white text appeared in the center of the darkness. Error. Architect not found. The room went silent. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Just a glitch, Emmerich said, his smile tight. Restarting the sequence. He tried again. Error. Architect not found. System lockdown initiated. Assets frozen. What is this? Auriella hissed, stepping closer. Emmerich, fix it. I don't know, Emmerich stammered. He typed furiously. It's asking for a bypass key. There shouldn't be a key. I wrote this code. But he hadn't. Deep down, in the repressed corners of his memory, he knew he hadn't written the core kernel. He had sat on the couch drinking scotch, while Norabel sat on the floor with her laptop, muttering about syntax bridges and neural pathways. He had taken her notes, handed them to his engineers, and claimed them. He had forgotten that she didn't just write the code. She was the code. Call it! Emmerich screamed, the veins in his neck bulging. Get the engineers in here. His lead engineer, a frantic man named Silas, ran up with a tablet. Sir, we're locked out. It's not just the update. It's the bank accounts, the operational funds. The system thinks we're intruders. It's rerouting control to an external IP. Trace it! I can't! It's bouncing through a dozen satellites. Wait, it's pinging a location in the financial district, the Westmere Spire. Emmerich froze. The name hit him like a physical slap. Westmere. Hadrian Westmere. The billionaire rival who had been trying to buy him out for years. Then, the image of the black car flashed in his mind, the silver-haired silhouette. "No," Emmerich whispered. "That's impossible. She doesn't know him." "Who?" Oriella demanded. "Nora Bell." Oriella laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Your mouse of a wife? Emmerich, get a grip. She's probably crying in a motel room." Just then, the massive screen behind them flickered. The error message vanished. It was replaced by a live video feed. It wasn't a motel room. It was a room of glass and steel, high above the city. In the center of the frame sat Nora Bell. She had let her hair down. It cascaded over her shoulders in waves. She wasn't wearing the grey dress anymore. She was wearing a tailored black blazer, sharp and intimidating. Next to her stood Hadrian Westmore. The entire party in Emmerich's office gasped. Nora Bell looked directly into the camera lens, and Emmerich felt like she was staring into his soul. "Hello, Emmerich," she said. Her voice was amplified through the war room speakers, clear and commanding. "I forgot to mention one thing in the settlement." Emmerich stared at the screen, his mouth opening and closing. "Nora, what are you doing? How are you with him?" "You kept the house," Nora Bell said calmly. "You kept the cars. You kept the name. But you forgot who built the foundation." She leaned forward, her eyes cold fire. "I'm taking my mind back, Emmerich, and I'm taking the company with it." The screen went black. In the silence that followed, the only sound was the shattering of a champagne glass Oriella dropped onto the marble floor. The jagged shards reflected the panicked faces of the board members. Emmerich grabbed the console, his knuckles white. "Get my car," he snarled. "We're going to the Spire." "You can't just walk in there," Oriella warned. "She's my wife." "Ex-wife," Vance the lawyer corrected quietly from the corner. "And if she's with Westmere, she's out of your league." Emmerich ignored him, storming out of the room. But as he reached the elevator, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He answered. "Mr. Swanshire," a voice slithered through the receiver. It sounded like gravel grinding on velvet. "This is Garrick Hollowthorne. I believe we have a mutual problem. And her name is Nora Bell." The office of Garrick Hollowthorne was a study in suffocation. If the Westmere Spire was a monument to air and light, the Hollowthorne estate was a shrine to earth and shadow. The walls were lined with dark, oil-rubbed walnut that seemed to absorb the dim light of the room. Heavy velvet curtains, the color of dried blood, were drawn tight against the afternoon sun, and the only illumination came from a fireplace that roared with unnecessary violence, despite the summer heat baking the city outside. Emmerich Swanshire sat in a leather wingback chair that was positioned slightly lower than the one across from him, a classic, petty psychological trick that Garrick used to make his guests feel physically smaller. Emmerich hated it. He hated the smell of the room, a cloying mixture of expensive brandy, old paper, and the stale smoke of imported cigars. It smelled like power that had curdled. "You lost her," Garrick said. He didn't ask. He stated it with the finality of a judge reading a death sentence. He was standing by a crystal decanter, pouring amber liquid into 2 snifters. Garrick was a man who looked like he had been carved from driftwood, jagged, weathered, and hard. "I didn't lose her," Emmerich snapped, his ego bruising under Garrick's gaze. He shifted in the low chair, trying to sit up straighter. "She deceived me. She was funneling data to Westmere. It's corporate espionage, plain and simple. I'll have her in handcuffs by the end of the week." "Is it espionage?" Garrick walked over, handing Emmerich the glass. His fingers were long and cold. "Or is it that you never bothered to secure the intellectual property because you assumed she was too stupid to leave you?" Emmerich took the glass, his hand trembling slightly. He drank the brandy in one burning gulp, desperate for the grounding heat of the alcohol. She's with Westmere now. She locked down my systems. I can't access the neural net. My investors are calling every 5 minutes. The stock has dropped 12% since the live stream. I need a solution, Garrick. Not a lecture. Westmere is a romantic, Garrick mused, ignoring Emmerich's panic. He began to pace before the fire, his shadow stretching long and distorted across the Persian rug. He believes in legacy, honor. He wants Norabel because he respects her mind. That makes him weak. He sees people as investments to be nurtured. I see them as resources to be mined. "And what do you want?" Emmerich asked, watching the older man. Garrick stopped. He turned, the firelight catching the predatory gleam in his eyes. "I don't care about honor. I care about domination. Westmere controls the logistics of this city, the shipping, the grid, the infrastructure. If he gets your neural network tech, Norabel's tech, he controls the flow of information. He becomes the brain and the body. He becomes untouchable." Garrick slammed his hand on the heavy oak desk, the sound like a gunshot in the quiet room. "We cannot let them merge Project Ether with Westmere's infrastructure. If they do, they'll render both of our companies obsolete by Christmas." Emmerich felt a cold sweat prickling his back. "So, what's the plan?" "I can't sue her. The prenup was ironclad, but it didn't cover intellectual property created before the marriage properly. Vance messed up. He thought she was a housewife." "Forget the lawyers," Garrick sneered, dismissing the legal system with a wave of his hand. "Lawyers are for people who play by the rules. We destroy the reputation. We destroy the trust. Norabel is brilliant, yes, but she is fragile. She spent years hiding behind you. She fears the spotlight. She fears judgment. We force her into it and we watch her break." Garrick pressed a discreet button on the underside of his desk. The heavy double doors creaked open, and Oriella walked in. But she looked different. Gone was the devoted girlfriend act she had played for Emmerich, the wide-eyed admiration, the red silk. She wore a sharp, charcoal business suit. Her hair was pinned up efficiently. She didn't look at Emmerich with love. She looked at him with the cold assessment of an auditor. She nodded to Garrick with familiarity. Emmerich looked between them, the realization dawning slowly, painfully. "You know each other?" "Oriella has been on my payroll for 3 years, Garrick said casually, as if discussing the weather. "She was the one who suggested you divorce Norabel, wasn't she? She whispered in your ear that you deserved better, that you were the genius." Emmerich stood up, knocking his chair over with a crash. "You played me. You orchestrated my divorce." "I optimized you," Oriella said, her voice devoid of affection, sharp as a scalpel. "You were stagnant, Emmerich. You were resting on your laurels, letting your wife do the heavy lifting while you drank champagne." Garrick needed the Swanshire tech to be vulnerable. "We needed Norabel out of the way to seize the assets. We just underestimated her exit strategy." "Sit down, Emmerich," Garrick commanded. "You can be angry later. Right now, you can be useful." Garrick spread a large blueprint on the desk. "Tomorrow night, the Westmere Foundation hosts the Solstice Gala. It's the event of the season. Hadrian plans to introduce Norabel as his new partner. He plans to unveil Project Ether to the world." "And?" Emmerich asked, feeling like a pawn in a game he didn't understand, his anger warring with his desperation to survive. "And," Garrick smiled, showing too many teeth, "we're going to prove that the code she wrote was stolen. From me." "But it wasn't," Emmerich frowned, confused. "She wrote it. I saw her." "Truth is irrelevant, Emmerich. Only perception matters. We will plant the evidence. We will destroy her credibility in front of the world's press. And when Westmere sees she is a liability, a thief, a fraud, He will drop her to save his own reputation, and she will come crawling back to you to unlock your system, just to make the pain stop. Emmerich looked at the fire. He thought of Norabel's face in the courtroom. The silence. Then he thought of her on the screen, powerful, untouchable, claiming she was taking her mind back. He wanted that power back. He wanted to own it. He wanted to break her back down into the quiet thing she used to be. "Do it," Emmerich whispered. High above the city, the atmosphere in the Westmere penthouse was electric, with a different kind of intensity. It was 3 a.m., the hour of wolves and creators, but no one was sleeping. Norabel stood before a massive holographic interface that dominated the center of the room. She was conducting a symphony of light. Her hands moved through the air, manipulating three-dimensional lines of code that floated around her like complex fractals of logic and data. For the first time in a decade, she wasn't hiding her work in a basement or disguising it as Emmerich's vision. She was painting with pure thought. Hadrian sat on a stool nearby, a mug of black coffee in his hand, watching her. He wasn't interfering. He knew better than to interrupt a genius in the flow state. He watched the way her eyes darted across the floating syntax, the confidence in her posture that had been absent just hours ago. "The architecture is beautiful," Rhiannon said. She was an older woman, a legendary cryptographer who had worked with Hadrian for 30 years. She walked with a cane, but her mind was sharp as a diamond drill. She stood by the console, interpreting the data stream. "You've created a self-healing network. It mimics the human nervous system. If one node goes down, the others compensate instantly." "It's not just self-healing," Norabel murmured, swiping a cluster of angry red code to the side and replacing it with a soothing stream of gold. "It's empathetic. Project Ether learns from the stress levels of the users. In a disaster, an earthquake, a flood, it prioritizes the most panic-stricken signals. It finds the people who are too scared to speak." "Like you were," Hadrian said softly. Norabel paused. Her hand hovered in the air. The hologram froze, bathing her face in a golden glow. She lowered her hand and turned to him. "I wasn't scared to speak, Hadrian. I was scared that if I spoke, I would destroy the only person I thought loved me. I made myself small so he could feel big." "Emmerich didn't love you, Nora," Primrose called out from the server rack, where she was rerouting cables. She popped a stick of gum. "He loved the reflection of himself he saw in your eyes. He loved the battery, not the machine." "I know that now," Norabel said. She walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the glittering city lights. Somewhere out there, Emmerich was plotting. She could feel it in her bones. But old habits die hard. I keep waiting for him to walk in and tell me I'm doing it wrong, to tell me I'm too emotional to be logical. Hadrian joined her at the window. "That is why tomorrow night is crucial. You aren't just revealing the technology. You are revealing yourself. The world needs to see the face behind the mind. You have to claim your name." "I'm not a public figure," Norabel admitted, her voice trembling slightly. She hugged her arms around herself. "I'm a ghost. I've spent 10 years in the background. What if I freeze?" "Ghosts haunt," Hadrian said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You are here to live. You have to be ready. Garrick Hollowthorne isn't going to sit this out. He's going to come for you. He's a man who fears nothing except losing control." "Let him come," Rhiannon said, tapping her cane against the floor. "We have something he doesn't." "What's that?" Norabel asked. "We have the truth," Rhiannon smiled, a wicked glint in her eye. "And we have the receipts. Every line of code you wrote has a timestamp in the metadata that predates Emmerich's inspiration, by months. Norabel looked back at the hologram. The code glowed with a warm, golden light. It was undeniable proof of her skill. It was her fingerprint, etched in digital stone. "Primrose," Norabel commanded, her voice gaining strength, the tremble vanishing. "Lock down the kernel. Encrypt it with my biometric signature. If anyone, Emmerich, Garrick, the NSA, tries to tamper with Arthur, I want the system to scream so loud the whole internet hears it." "On it, boss," Primrose grinned, typing furiously. "Setting the alarm to apocalypse." Norabel turned back to Hadrian. "I need a dress. Not something quiet, not something grey. I'm done fading away." Hadrian smiled, his eyes crinkling. "I took the liberty of calling a tailor in Milan. The dress is already here." "It's not a dress, Norabel. It's a declaration of war." The solstice gala was the event of the season, a sprawling display of wealth and influence held at the Metropolitan Museum. The great hall was transformed into a glittering palace of light and excess. The city's elite, politicians, tech moguls, celebrities, and socialites drifted through the halls, clutching crystal champagne flutes and whispering rumors. The biggest rumor, the one buzzing on every pair of lips, was about Hadrian Westmere's mystery partner. Emmerich arrived with Oriella on his arm. He looked impeccable in a tuxedo, but his eyes were darting around nervously, sweat beading on his upper lip. Oriella was a vision in blood-red velvet, her smile predatory, her hand gripping Emmerich's arm tight enough to leave bruises. Garrick Hollowthorne arrived separately, moving through the crowd like a dark current, shaking hands and planting seeds of doubt with a whisper here, a chuckle there. "Have you heard?" Garrick whispered to a prominent senator near the ice sculpture. "Westmere is desperate. He's bleeding money. He's bringing in a fraud to bolster his stock price." "Is that so?" the senator asked, intrigued. "Stolen tech." Garrick nodded gravely, swirling his whiskey. "My sources say the woman he's parading tonight is an intellectual thief, a corporate spy who slept her way into Swansea Tech and stole the keys on her way out." The whispers spread like wildfire. By the time the lights dimmed for the main presentation, the room was thick with skepticism. The air felt heavy, charged with the anticipation of a public execution. Emmerich stood near the stage, his heart hammering against his ribs. He touched the inside pocket of his jacket, where a silver flash drive rested. It contained the falsified logs Oriella had fabricated, logs that proved Norabel stole the code from Hollowthorne Industries 3 years ago. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice boomed over the speakers. Hadrian Westmere walked onto the stage. The applause was polite, but restrained. The audience was waiting for the other shoe to drop. "Tonight," Hadrian began, his voice echoing through the great hall, commanding absolute silence. "We stop looking at the ground and start looking at the horizon. I have spent my life building infrastructure, roads, bridges, cables, but the future isn't concrete, it's connection." He gestured to the massive velvet curtain behind him. "I present to you the architect of that future, the creator of Project Ether, Norabel." The curtain rose. Norabel stepped forward. The room went silent. She wasn't wearing grey. She wasn't wearing the clothes of a victim. She was wearing gold. The dress was structured, metallic, a mesh of golden fabric that looked less like clothing and more like armor forged from light. It caught every beam in the room, reflecting it back with blinding intensity. Her hair was slicked back, her face exposed, her makeup sharp and fierce. She didn't look down. She didn't shrink. She walked to the microphone, her heels clicking with the precision of a ticking clock. "For 10 years, Norabel spoke, her voice steady, amplified to fill the cavernous space. "I was a voice in an empty room. I built worlds that bore another man's name. I let my silence be interpreted as weakness. She looked directly at Emmerich in the front row. He flinched, physically recoiling from the intensity of her gaze. But silence, she continued, is not emptiness. It is potential energy, and tonight the potential becomes kinetic. She raised her hand. The massive screen behind her lit up. The ether interface appeared, a living, breathing map of the world's data, glowing with golden veins that pulsed with a heartbeat. "This is ether," she said. "It cannot be bought. It cannot be weaponized. It detects distress before it happens. It connects the disconnected, and it is open source." The crowd gasped. A ripple of shock went through the room. "Open source?" Garrick hissed from the shadows, his face twisting. "She's giving it away?" "If it's open source," Norabel said, smiling for the first time, a smile of pure victory, "it belongs to everyone, which means it cannot be stolen, it cannot be hoarded." She had undercut Garrick's entire plan. If the tech was free, the accusation of theft was meaningless. You cannot steal what is given freely to the world. But Emmerich, fueled by jealousy and Auriella's whispering poison, panicked. He wasn't thinking about strategy anymore. He was thinking about his own vanishing relevance. He jumped onto the steps of the stage, his face red. "Liar!" Emmerich shouted. The crowd turned. Cameras flashed blindingly, capturing his outburst. "She's a fraud!" Emmerich yelled, pulling the flash drive from his pocket and waving it like a weapon. "This code belongs to Swanshire Tech. She stole it from my servers before she left. I have the logs. She's a thief!" Norabel looked down at him. She didn't look angry. She didn't look scared. She looked disappointed. "Emmerich," she said into the mic, her voice calm against his hysteria, "you don't even know how to read the logs." "I have proof!" Emmerich screamed, sweat flying. "Garrick Hollowthorne can verify it. It's his proprietary algorithm she modified. He told me." Garrick froze in the shadows. Emmerich had just implicated him publicly. The plan was for Garrick to remain the silent victim, not for Emmerich to scream his name like a co-conspirator in a grand conspiracy. "Hollowthorne?" Norabel asked, arching an eyebrow. She looked at the tech booth. "Primrose, play the tape." On the giant screen, the beautiful ether map vanished. It was replaced by a video feed. It was a recording. Grainy, black and white, but unmistakable. It showed Emmerich's office from 2 days ago. It showed Auriella handing Emmerich the flash drive. Auriella, on screen. "Plant this. It has the fabricated timestamps. Garrick wants her ruined. He needs the patent." Emmerich, on screen. "As long as I get my company back, I don't care what happens to her. Destroy her." The room erupted. The gasp was so loud it sucked the air out of the hall. Emmerich stood frozen on the stairs, the flash drive in his hand, feeling suddenly like a live grenade. He looked at Auriella. She was already backing away, vanishing into the crowd, abandoning the sinking ship. He looked at Garrick, who was glaring at him with pure, unadulterated hatred. Then he looked at Norabel. She stood high above him, bathed in gold light, a titan looking down at a bug. She hadn't screamed. She hadn't fought dirty. She had just let the truth speak. "Go home, Emmerich," Norabel said softly, but the microphone carried it to everyone. "It's over." Security guards moved in, gently escorting a stunned, stumbling Emmerich off the stage. The applause that started then was not polite. It was thunderous, a wave of sound that shook the floor. Norabel looked at Hadrian, who was clapping the loudest, his eyes shining with pride. She had won. Or so she thought. Suddenly, the lights in the museum flickered. The golden map on the screen turned a violent, blood red. A screeching noise tore through the speakers, covering the applause. Primrose's voice came over Norabel's earpiece, panicked and breathless. "Boss! Someone's manually overriding the system. It's not a hack, it's a hardware breach. They're physically at the spire." Norabel's blood ran cold. Garrick hadn't just relied on the gala. It was a distraction. While they were here, his team was breaking into the Westmere servers to destroy the source code physically. She looked at Hadrian. "We have to go. Now." The ride back to the Westmere spire was a blur of neon lights and adrenaline, a stark contrast to the smooth, silent glide that had carried Norabel away from the courthouse just days ago. The Rolls-Royce Phantom, usually a vessel of calm, now tore through the city streets, its massive engine roaring as the driver disregarded speed limits, weaving through the late-night traffic with terrified precision. Inside the cabin, the air was thick with tension. Hadrian was on the secure phone, barking orders to his security team, but the line was dead. Static hissed in the receiver. "Jamming signal," Hadrian growled, tossing the phone onto the leather seat. His face was grim, lit intermittently by the passing street lamps. Hollowthorne isn't playing corporate games anymore. He's brought a military-grade jammer to the financial district. This is a raid. Norabel sat with her laptop open on her knees, the golden dress shimmering incongruously in the dark car, the armor of a queen heading into a street fight. Her fingers flew across the keys, her eyes scanning streams of cascading red text that flowed like arterial blood across the screen. "They've cut the hard lines," Norabel said, her voice tight but steady. "They aren't trying to steal ether, Hadrian. They know they can't sell it now that I've declared it open source. They're trying to delete it. They want to scorch the earth so no one can have it. If they wipe the core servers before the decentralized upload completes, the code dies." Garrick knows he can't compete with a free world, Hadrian realized, checking the magazine of a matte black pistol he had retrieved from a hidden compartment. If he can't monetize it, he kills it. "Primrose is still inside," Norabel said, looking up, fear flickering in her hazel eyes for the first time. "She's trying to hold the firewall, but the breach is physical. They're at the server room door. She's not a soldier, Hadrian." The car screeched to a halt in the underground garage of the spire. The usual polished concrete silence was broken by the sound of shouting. The security station was empty, the glass shattered. In the shadows of the pillars, men in dark tactical gear, Hollowthorne's private mercenaries, were setting up a perimeter. "Stay in the car," Hadrian commanded, his hand on the door handle. Norabel grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "No. This isn't a gunfight, Hadrian. It's a logic puzzle. If they breach the server room, they'll use an electromagnetic pulse to wipe the drives. I need to trigger the failsafe manually." "The failsafe is in the penthouse," Hadrian argued. "That's 40 floors up, and the elevators are likely locked. Then we take the service lift. It runs on a separate grid. I wrote the override code for the building management system myself." She looked at him, her gaze steel. "I am not waiting in the car anymore. Never again." Hadrian looked at her, seeing the transformation complete. The woman who had signed the divorce papers in silence was gone. In her place was a partner. He nodded once. They moved toward the service elevator, sticking to the shadows. Hadrian moved with the grace of a man who had seen combat long before he saw boardrooms, disarming a guard at the elevator bank with a swift, brutal motion that made Norabel flinch but not look away. He took the man's keycard. They shot upwards. The elevator hummed, rattling slightly, oblivious to the violence below. "Why?" Norabel asked in the quiet of the lift, watching the floor numbers climb. "Why risk your life for this code? You're a billionaire. You could retire. You didn't have to help me." Hadrian kept his eyes on the doors. My daughter died in a flood 10 years ago, Norabel. The rescue teams couldn't communicate because the cell towers were overloaded. The grid went down. She was trapped for 6 hours, waiting for a signal that never came. He looked at her, and the granite facade of his face cracked, revealing a decade of grief. If ether had existed then, if that neural net had been active, finding the silence amidst the noise, she might have lived. This isn't business for me. It's penance. Norabel looked at him, her heart aching. She understood then that his silence was just as loud as hers. They were both building bridges over the chasms of their pasts. The doors pinged open at the 80th floor. The penthouse was chaos. The pristine glass walls were shattered. The beautiful holographic displays were flickering and dying. Standing by the main console, surrounded by the wreckage of the war room, was Garrick Hollowthorne himself. He was flanked by 2 large men with rifles, and on the floor, handcuffed to a radiator, was Primrose. Her neon hair was messy, and she was nursing a bleeding lip, but her eyes were defiant. "So the belle of the ball returns," Garrick sneered, turning to face them. He held a device in his hand, a dead man switch connected to a large, humming black box sitting on top of the main server rack, an EMP generator. "I told you, Norabel. You should have stayed in the shadows." "Let her go, Garrick," Hadrian said, his voice calm, leveling his weapon at the older man. "Tut-tut," Garrick wagged a finger. "You shoot me, I drop this switch. The EMP goes off. Ether is dust, along with every financial record in this building. You'll be destitute, Westmere, a king of nothing." Norabel stepped forward, her hands raised, the golden dress rustling softly. "It's me you want, Garrick. Let them go. I'll unlock the system. I'll stop the open source upload. I'll transfer the IP to Hollowthorne Industries." "Nora, no!" Primrose shouted, struggling against the cuffs. "Don't give it to him." Garrick laughed, a dry, triumphant sound. "The dutiful wife returns, always willing to compromise to keep the peace. Come here, then. Type it in. Transfer ownership." He gestured to the main keyboard. Norabel walked slowly toward the console. The heat radiating from the servers was intense. She could feel Garrick breathing down her neck, smelling of stale cigar smoke and desperation. She looked at the screen. It was locked down, the cursor blinking, awaiting the architect's command. She placed her hands on the keys. They were cool to the touch. "Do it," Garrick hissed. "Sign it over." Norabel closed her eyes for a split second. She thought of the silence of the courtroom. She thought of Emmerich's dismissive laugh. She thought of Hadrian's daughter waiting in the dark. She thought of the millions of voices that went unheard every day because the systems of the world were built for profit, not connection. She opened her eyes. They were cold, clear, and absolutely terrifying. "You misunderstood something about me, Garrick," she said softly. "What?" "I said silence isn't emptiness." She typed rapidly, her fingers a blur. "It's a weapon." She didn't type the transfer code. She didn't type the shutdown command. She typed a sequence she had memorized years ago, a sequence she had buried deep inside the very heart of the code, a dormant protocol waiting for a heartbeat. "Execute. Protocol echo." "What did you do?" Garrick yelled, seeing the screens turn blinding white instead of the green of a transfer. "What is that?" "I didn't give you the code," Norabel said, stepping back as the servers began to whine with a high-pitched frequency. "I broadcasted it." Suddenly, every screen in the room, the shattered monitors, the tablets on the floor, even the phone in Garrick's pocket, lit up with the golden veins of ether. Norabel had used the ether infrastructure to push the code not to a cloud server, but to every device in range. She had decentralized the entire network instantly. The code now lived on millions of phones, laptops, smartwatches, and tablets across the city. It was leaping from device to device via Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, a benign virus of liberation. "It's gone," Norabel smiled, the wind from the shattered window catching her hair. "It's everywhere. It's on the internet. It's on your mercenaries' phones. You can't kill it unless you destroy the entire internet. You can't wipe it unless you wipe the world." Garrick stared at the screen in horror. The EMP was useless now. Blowing the server room would be like trying to dry up the ocean with a spoon. The water was already in the rain. You fool!" Garrick screamed, his face turning purple. "You gave away billions! You destroyed the asset!" "I bought freedom," Norabel corrected. In the distraction of Garrick's collapse, Hadrian moved. He holstered his weapon and tackled Garrick, knocking the detonator away before it could trigger. The two mercenaries raised their rifles, but a deafening, oscillating noise filled the room. Rhiannon had arrived from the panic room, wielding a sonic cannon prototype, another one of Westmere's toys she had been saving. The mercenaries dropped to their knees, clutching their ears, incapacitated by the sound. Security teams swarmed the room a moment later, securing the perimeter. Garrick was pinned to the floor, his face pressed against the glass, forced to look out at the city. It was beautiful. The skyline was lighting up, not just with electric lights, but with the digital handshake of ether. Norabel went to Primrose, unhooking her cuffs. "Are you okay?" Primrose wiped the blood from her lip, looked at the chaos and grinned. "That was the most metal thing I have ever seen. You literally bricked his ambition?" Norabel stood up and looked at Hadrian. He was straightening his suit, breathing hard, looking at the screens that showed the code propagating globally. "We lost the proprietary rights," she said, watching the potential fortune evaporate into the public domain. Hadrian looked at her, and then at the photo of his daughter on his desk. "We saved the world, Norabel. I think it's a fair trade." 3 months later. The morning sun hit the pavement of the city, but this time the heat didn't feel oppressive. It felt warm, promising. The air smelled of autumn leaves and coffee. Norabel sat at an outdoor cafe, a sketchbook in front of her. She wasn't designing code today. She was drawing a garden. The chaos of the last few months had settled into a steady, rhythmic hum of productivity. Westmere Swanshire, now rebranded simply as Ether Systems, was the leading non-profit tech firm in the world. A shadow fell over the table. She didn't flinch. She finished shading a rose petal before looking up. Emmerich stood there. He looked different. The expensive Italian suit was gone, replaced by a generic blazer that didn't quite fit his shoulders. The Patek Philippe was missing from his wrist. The arrogance that used to define his posture had been replaced by a weary resignation. He looked like a man who had woken up from a long, intoxicating dream to find the house empty. "I saw the news," Emmerich said, his voice raspier than she remembered. "You're the CEO." "Co-CEO," Norabel corrected gently. "Hadrian focuses on the hardware. I run the logic. It's a balance." Emmerich nodded, looking at his shoes. He pulled out a chair but didn't sit. He waited for permission, a reversal of roles that wasn't lost on either of them. "Sit, Emmerich," she said. He sat. He looked at the sketchbook. "I always hated when you did that. I thought it was a waste of time." "I know," Norabel said. "But gardens grow, Emmerich. Code just exists. I needed to make something that grows." "I lost everything, Nora," he said, the confession tumbling out. "The company, the house, Auriella. She turned state's witness against me to save herself from the fraud charges. Garrick is in prison. I'm looking at probation and bankruptcy." "I know," Norabel said quietly. She didn't offer pity. She simply acknowledged the facts. "I came to ask." Emmerich hesitated, his hands clasping together on the table. "Why didn't you destroy me? You could have pressed charges for the years of emotional abuse. You could have buried me under lawsuits. You could have left me with nothing but a jail cell." Norabel took a sip of her tea. She looked at him, searching for the anger she used to feel. It was gone. It had burned up in the fire of her own resurrection. "Because I don't care enough to destroy you, Emmerich," she said honestly. "Hate takes energy. It takes space in the hard drive. I'm using my energy for other things now. Destroying you would mean keeping you in my life. And I have evicted you." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, cream-colored envelope. She slid it across the table. "What is this?" Emmerich asked, eyeing it warily. "A recommendation letter," Norabel said, "for a teaching position at the City Community College. They need a basic coding instructor. You were always good at the basics, Emmerich. It's the complex stuff, the human stuff you couldn't handle." Emmerich stared at the envelope. It was charity, yes, but it was also a lifeline. It was a chance to be useful instead of important. "Why?" he whispered, tears pricking his eyes. "Because everyone deserves a restart," she said, picking up her pen. "Even a glitch like you." Emmerich took the envelope. He looked at her one last time, really looked at her, and saw the woman he had been too blind to appreciate. He saw the strength he had mistaken for weakness. "Goodbye, Norabel." "Goodbye, Emmerich." He walked away, blending into the crowd, a small figure in a big city. Norabel watched him go, then turned back to her drawing. A moment later, the sleek, black Rolls-Royce pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down. Hadrian was in the back, but he wasn't alone. A young girl, maybe 10 years old, was sitting next to him. His niece, whom he had started mentoring in engineering. "Ready, partner?" Hadrian asked, smiling. "We have a meeting with the UN Disaster Relief Committee." Norabel stood up, closing her sketchbook. She looked at the city. It was noisy, chaotic, and messy. But it was hers. She wasn't riding away to escape anymore. She was riding toward something. She got into the car, the door closing with a solid, satisfying thud. "Where to?" the driver asked. Norabel smiled, and for the first time in her life, she didn't look for approval. She didn't wait for permission. She just spoke. "Forward." The car glided into the traffic, disappearing into the bright, endless stream of the future. And that, my friends, is how you leave a toxic past behind. Norabel didn't just leave Emmerich. She outgrew him. She didn't just find a billionaire. She found her voice. The silence wasn't weakness. It was the deep breath before the plunge. In a world that constantly tells you to scream to be heard, sometimes the most powerful move is to simply build something so undeniable that it speaks for itself. If you enjoyed Norabel's journey from silence to gold, hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder of their own worth. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss our next story. Until next time, stay resilient.